All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Tech Tuesday. Thank you for joining. I'm Vanessa, and today we have Drew Wright from the Wood Library, and he's going to be teaching us a little bit about PitchBook. Before we begin, if you are new to Tech Tuesday or you haven't been here a while, we do expect a lot of people to be in today's session. So everyone is muted just to avoid any background noises during our session today. If you have any questions at any point during the session, feel free to drop it in the chat just by hitting the chat button at the bottom of your Zoom window. And we'll be monitoring that so we can, pause at some point and answer your questions. I'm also recording today's session. So later today, I'll be sending everybody who registered a follow-up email with the video that they can watch whenever they want, or even share it with some of their colleagues who may not have been able to attend today, as well as some helpful links about the tool that we are talking about today. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Drew. Hey, Drew, thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for letting us talk about PitchBook, which is a relatively new tool for us here at Weil and Ithaca and the Tech Campus and every sort of group that in between there. So it's really new for us. We're still getting really into the nooks and crannies of it. So this one is going to be a pretty high level overview introduction of just how to access it, some of the limitations for using the academic version of PitchBook, and how this sort of basic navigation kind of works. And I'm going to leave a good chunk of time for questions at the end, because we're probably going to use those questions then to inform future sessions as we start to learn more about how our specific population uses PitchBook, as opposed to the straight kind of business entrepreneurial types that will also use this tool. So please don't hesitate with any types of questions that we have, because like I said, it'll be very helpful for future trainings. So with that said, first off, how do we actually get access to PitchBook? And I will call it Pitchfork at least a couple times, and I apologize in advance. I'll try to catch myself. But if I ever accidentally say Pitchfork, I mean PitchBook. But access it from our library sites, it's not the easiest, most straightforward thing. You have to go to e-resources on our library homepage, and then you can type in PitchBook. And this takes us to the listing in our catalog. And this link right here will take you out to the PitchBook homepage. So if this is something that you think you're going to use fairly frequently, you can copy this link, and bookmark it in your browser or something like that. And this should work for you as you go forward. You don't have to be on VPN or anything like that. I'm currently not, so you don't have to worry about that. So there's the link, and it should take you to this institutional email login for PitchBook. If it doesn't, there will be an option down here that says something like login with SSO or single sign-on. So we're always going to log in this way and click login, and I'm already logged in case there's a little delay. So that's the basic way to access PitchBook. Again, front page, e-resources, search for PitchBook, come here, click on this, or again, just link or save this particular link, and you should be good to go. All right, so when you get into PitchBook, you're going to see a lot of stuff. And again, we're still getting into the nitty gritty of the things on our end when we're doing training and running reports for people and things like that. So we're just going to focus really quickly on some of the things that you might be interested in right off the bat. And that just for people that I've worked with in the past, what they're normally interested in with using these kind of tools. And that's, we're going to be looking at how to set up a screener, which is essentially a search for either companies or venture capitalists or private equity backed investors. And we can look how those have performed along with the companies that they fund and the companies they invest in, both private and public, which is very nice to have the ability to search both of those things. So we're going to look at how to set up a screener, which we do here. And then we're going to look at how to look at market size estimates and the emerging space reports that PitchBook kind of already has pre-canned and ready to go. And those are just kind of really great snapshots of particular industries, as well as forecasts into the future as to how those are expected to behave, in addition to all of the reports that they get their information from. We'll jump right into that. And again, if I'm going too fast, please let me know. We'll slow it down. If you have any questions, we can do that. But it's kind of becomes apparent as you play around with it and see, what's available to you when you're searching, that the sort of value starts to come out. So we will just pop right in and we'll set up a company screener. So say that you have an idea or you have a company that you're thinking of forming, and you either want to know the other companies that are in that space, either geographically or conceptually, or the kind of industry that they're in. And you want to see what types of companies are funding or backing those types of similar companies to what you're thinking of coming up. So the way to do that in PitchBook is to set up a screener. So you could basically have just an insane amount of information to set up to filter down these 3.5 million companies that PitchBook indexes. So we're going to start pretty small, just so we get a nice set that we can take a look with. So we'll say we're going to start with companies based in New York. So New York. And now we've got down to 134,000 results. And if we were looking specifically for just companies that are backed by private equity or venture capitalists or by an angel or something like that, we can filter that here. We can also filter by all sorts of information about deal size, dates, specific companies, things like that. Or we can go into industry and say, we're interested in looking at healthcare industries, specifically devices, and we'll pick surgical devices, because that gets us down to a nice low number. So essentially what this is doing is it's looking for companies based in New York that are in the surgical device industry. So if that sounds cool with us and we want to just kind of start there, we can go search. And it starts by pulling up a broad overview that, again, gives you a large chunk of information without having to do a lot of drilling down. But it lets us know kind of the companies that are involved, the 81 that we knew, how many deals those companies have made, the types of investors that they're working with, and then some general information about valuations, who's got the largest, what the median is, just to give you sort of an idea of the type of funding that you might be interested in pursuing as you're going forward. So we get nice information chronologically. We get some nice information about who the larger companies who the larger companies are, in addition to who the largest investors are. And we can drill down into that, which I'll show you a little bit later. In addition to these market reports, which are also very, very useful. Again, even if you're just doing research on general market behavior or market size, and you're not in the funding or investment chasing game at all, the reports are very helpful. And it gives us, again, lots and lots and lots and lots of information. So now at this stage, what you might be interested in doing is saying, okay, I want to look at all of the companies and who they are and some general information about them. So if you click on the companies, you get these nice, very detailed, wonderful spreadsheets. And there is a download button here that does let you download to Excel. However, let's see if it's going to tell me. There is a limit to how much we can download a day and a month. So this limit, when it says you have 10 downloads remaining, downloading an entire chart does not count as a download. Each individual row counts as an additional download. So when it says I have 10 downloads remaining, that means that I can download 10 rows of data, which, as you can imagine, is very limiting. So not just 10 per day, but 25 per month. So I wouldn't even be able to download this whole table because it exceeds our monthly download quota. And you're going to run into that a few different times. So right now, I'm going to stop and ask if anyone has any questions about the download limits, because that will come up several times. No, perfect. But they sort of counteract that by giving you actually a lot of customization options inside the flowchart, or the chart inside of the actual app. So you don't really need to be able to download it. You can even set up pivot tables, which is probably what most people would do with a downloaded Excel file anyway. So you can do a lot of customization here, which is pretty nice. And you can save everything as you're working along. So if you do end up editing this table a lot, or moving stuff around, or filtering, or deciding to get rid of particular fields, you can save that view, and you can always just keep coming back to it without having to download it and keep it locally. You'll also notice that we don't have access to every field for every company. So we have an academic license as opposed to the commercial license that the larger companies have. So we don't always get to have every piece of information. However, we do get a ton. So if you're doing something like putting together a market size estimate for something that you're particularly interested in, or building your own kind of list of companies you're interested in, I think there's enough information here that we do have access to, that the stuff we're missing because of the license is probably not going to be that big a deal, or it's easily sort of worked around. So I mentioned we can filter and customize this stuff if we want. So if we wanted to look, for example, at only things that, for instance, were formerly VC backed, we can filter that here by just selecting formerly VC backed. So if there is something that you do really want to be able to export out, the way you can sort of narrow that down is through filters. So now I have a list of 10, so I could actually download this if I wanted to, and it would let me do that. And it tells me how many is being downloaded and how many I have left for the month. So it does give you a little bit of a heads up, so you're not completely taken aback by that. So that's if you really need to pull something out, filtering it down and getting rid of some of the noise if you're not actually interested in some of those things is kind of the way to do that. A bit of a workaround. So I'm going to go ahead and clear that filter. So this is all the companies, again, that were based in New York that are in that particular space of surgical devices. So we can click in and get again, a very detailed bunch of information based on that particular company. So rough size, what their deals are. We get some good history about who is working them, who's investing in them, and their basic financials that are available to the PitchBook subscribers. So again, this is where if you're noticing that you're going to be in a very similar field to Buffalo Filter, these are the same companies that have, or similar companies that have worked with them. So you can actually view them, and you can kind of put together a list and say that if you want to be included in this particular group, these are kind of the benchmarks and the metrics that you're going to have to sort of track to make sure that that is the group that you're going to be involved in. So a lot more information than most people would probably ever need, and it just keeps going. So this is the type of information that we look to our users to see what's useful for them, what should we focus on. But there's a lot of stuff here that you can play around with. Similarly, you can do the same thing with the investors that are investing in these companies. So while that loads up, So these are all the companies that have invested in the 81 companies that were part of our original screener. And it just gives you, again, tons of information that's available to you. A little bit of lingo, dry powder, basically liquid assets. I'm not sure why they chose that terminology, but there it is. And you can see, what their status is. Are they even, looking for new investment opportunities? Who do you reach out to contact those folks? And that's available on the screener view. And then again, we can drill down and get even more detailed, specific information about each type of investment opportunity, funder, PE, VC, angel, kind of whatever your focus is at the moment. So again, tons of information readily available just based on that very kind of basic screener that we set up. And you can do the same thing for all of these other sections as well. And there are pre-built screeners for you. So if you hover over the screeners on the left, you get the ones that are already canned. So if you want to do a investor specific search, you can do that here. You can use their individual screeners that they've already made, and then add your own filters or get more specific as you're playing around with that. So that is a quick introduction to screeners. Any questions?
Yeah, Drew, there was just one
Yeah.
about can you save multiple searches?
Yes. Yep. So you'll be able to save them as, and then you just enter a name for your search. And if you want to receive alerts whenever new information gets added to the table, you will receive a email alert. You can set up the frequency, so you can have a whole list of searches set up that depending on how often you want to get notified, or you can just pop back in and reload those saved searches if you want to. So that'll all show up at the bottom left in your account section.
There were a couple of questions regarding the download limit. Just to confirm, you said it was 25 downloads per user per month. Is that the amount? Okay.
Yep. And again, a download is a row, essentially.
Right.
So yeah, very annoying. We know.
Yeah, we did get a very, I think it's based on the laughing emoji. How do we see the limit? It doesn't look like there's a way other than very good filtering, right?
Yeah, so the filtering is really nice, and you can do a lot inside. Like I said, what I would do with this information is I would download it, and then I would usually manipulate it with a pivot table. But there is that functionality inside of the browser. I would imagine people probably requested that. So you can set up this kind of thing inside the browser yourself. But yeah, there is an Excel plugin that you can request through ITS. I should have included a link to that form. But it's an Excel plugin that integrates with our Office 365 version of Excel. And if you do download the data from PitchBook using our very tight limits, you can do a lot of kind of very sophisticated analysis using the PitchBook plugin. You can't necessarily do that if you're just copying the numbers and putting them in your own spreadsheet, which is another workaround that some people do sometimes. So they do sort of tie the value into being able to use their plugin. But again, the download limits are so strict. I don't know if that's going to be necessarily helpful for anyone. But if you are interested, you can look at the Excel plugin down here in this workflow section. I haven't played around with it too much because I ran into my download limits last month just from doing demos and playing around with it. So next month I'm going to definitely dig into that a little bit more. But anything else?
No, we had a question, but I think you already showed it because it was before you did. Using PitchBook to evaluate potential investors, you did go through the investors tab just to kind of show us how it works. So I think that answered that question.
Yeah. So again, there's a couple different ways to do it. You could either do a company search for companies that you would be similar to. and then looking at the investors tab, or just doing a straight up investors screen, which again is set up in a very similar way, but based on any criteria that you're interested in, you can then return a list of investors, and it gives you the same information that we would get from the investors tab in the other screener.
We just got a question. Could you please show us market size estimates tab?
Yes, yep, that's where we're going next. I just wanted
Okay,
to make sure the
awesome.
screeners were good to go,
All
which
right.
I think
Well,
we are.
that's the only other question at the moment, so feel free to show us.
Cool. Yeah, we'll pop right down there. So yeah, the other thing that I think people would be really interested in, the market size estimates. Again, it's really helpful if you're writing proposals, or if you're in the marketing side of things in any capacity. So it's broken down by markets. So you can either do a search to find anything that is relevant to you, or we can just click on these preloaded ones that are already being sort of canned and are relatively interesting that PitchBook has decided. So if we're interested in telemedicine, for example, and we click on the market size estimate, it gives us a very nice breakdown. This one goes out to 2027. Each estimate is a little bit different in how far out it goes and how detailed it is. So it gives you just a nice numerical sort of interface, and then it links to the reports that they use to get their information from. So if you are curious, it defaults to global. We can get it down to the US if you're interested in only US markets. If you are familiar with market research sources, you can filter here for that. So we like Frost and Sullivan. So if there's Frost and Sullivan reports available, I will almost always prefer to look at that. But it includes every source that they use there. And in addition to publishers, and if there's multiple markets, you can specify that as well. So this is sort of just like the first tier of the market estimate search. If you wanted to actually go a little bit deeper, you can click into the companies and deals, and then this essentially is the screener for that market. So this is another way that you could get into a potential list of investors or similar companies if you're familiar with the market that you're already interested in. You can just pop in and you get the exact same view that you would have gotten if you were doing a screener. So, and again, the information is a little bit different just depending on the companies that make it up and what's available. But more or less it's the same layout. You got the reports, exits, median valuation, and I don't think I showed this before, but if you wanted to drill down and say, what the hell's going on in 2022? Why is that value spiked so much? You can just go in and it drills down into where those numbers come from. So you can play around with that as well. So a lot of top heavy deals being done, which is skewing that number a little bit. So that's the gist of the market size. It's pretty straightforward. And what's nice about this is that it aggregates all of these individual reports. So a lot of these reports are things that you might run into through doing like a Google search or something like that, but you get paywalled, or you get behind a firewall access for that. So you can come into PitchBook and see if we have access to it through PitchBook. And if not the whole report, then at least the sort of the meat of the report, the numbers, if that's what you're mostly interested in. Any questions about that? So you can get very specific, and it keeps suggesting new reports and new markets for you to check out. If you want to drill down and get very, 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 very specific, you can.
I don't see any questions in the chat about the market size tab yet.
Okay. So similar is the emerging spaces tab. So this lets you, again, to kind of take a browse approach to the market sizes. So if you're interested in the healthcare field, and you're interested in psychedelics, which is kind of an emerging space in treatment. So you can go and get specifically drilled down into the psychedelic space. And again, it tells you deals, companies, investors. Again, this particular one has a bubble chart for you to take a look at, so you can see who the big players are in a graphical layout, which is sometimes quite nice. In addition to the stage that they're at, what are they being funded? Have they issued an IPO yet? Things of that nature. You get all of the news reports. And again, you get a list of all of the investors that are working in that and the total deals and things like that. So multiple ways to kind of get to the same information. Just, you know exactly what you're looking for. You can use a screener. Do you want to sort of take a look around and browse and see what's happening? You can click on the emerging spaces tab and sort of take a look at it that way. You can also get an idea of what companies are in which market, if the market is indexed for this particular company. So if it's public, we get the financial information. So yeah, so we get what the vertical is, which is essentially a group of companies. So this one particular one is about drug discovery, also biotech, psychedelics, which we already know. So if we wanted to drill down again even more, we could do that by clicking on keywords, verticals, drug discovery, biotech, et cetera, et cetera. Valuations. So for the public companies, you get different information than you do for the private companies, which makes sense. So any information, that's all that I had, because I wanted to make sure that there were plenty of plenty of time for questions towards the end, just so we could start to really flesh out support for this.
Yeah, guys, if you have questions, feel free to put them in the chat, or if you'd rather ask a question over the mic, if you go to your reactions button at the bottom of your Zoom window and do raise hand, I can actually unmute your mic for you, and then you can ask Drew anything you need.
Cool. And so if you do want to do sort of a lot of digging on your own, you're like, oh, I just want to play around with it. That's how I learn better. The Help Center has a ton of information, loads of videos, loads of kind of step-by-step tutorials. So you can either start with any of these sort of predefined lists, or you can go through and just do a search if you get hung up on a particular thing. But it is very nice, and it's they've pretty much thought of everything with their Help Center, which is quite nice.
We just got a question. If you've got any tips to navigate the phone app, since it looks different from the desktop.
Yeah, I tried to use the phone app myself. It was very tricky, and I did not like it at all. So that's something else that we need to play around with more on our end. But there's just so much information that gets presented. It was very difficult, again, just for me and like the other people, my colleagues in Ithaca, to use the app. But that is something that we'll devote some more time to in the future. So when we get app expert, we might do another kind of app specific training if we think it's useful.
As far as the app goes, would the sign in be the same way from the app using the single sign on, or?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. So what I had to do, and I don't know if this is required for everyone, but while we were testing it, I had to first log into the web app, and then I could log in through the mobile app. So now that it's been rolled out, you might be able to authenticate the first time through the mobile app. We need to test that.
Okay. We just got a question. What about the plugin that is shown? How does it affect downloads?
So it doesn't affect downloads. Once you still have the same limit that you're able to download, but what it does is it gives you in Excel a set of tools that can be used to manipulate PitchBook formatted data. So it's not quite just like a straight tabular data set. If you download a data set, you'll see it's got some other kind of like bells and whistles on it. So the PitchBook Excel plugin lets you do some additional analysis on the PitchBook formatted Excel spreadsheet that gets downloaded. But again, that's something that we need to play around with more on our end to get used to that. But it's from the very limited exposure that I had to it, it was pretty interesting. But again, you would have to be very specific on how you download your data so that you're able to get everything you want.
Oh, we just had a confirmation in the chat. I was able to use the phone app without going through desktop using SSO sign-in.
Oh, awesome. Cool. Perfect.
Any other questions, guys?
Cool. So, if you ever have any questions about this at all, you can either reach out to us through this reference question interface on the library's homepage. And then what we'll probably do is based on the content of the question, either myself or one of my colleagues in Ithaca will answer it. So if it's more of a medical question, I'll probably do it. But we do have some people who do kind of straight market research type of work, and we might kick you to our Ithaca colleagues for those types of questions, because we only looked at the medical centric stuff here, but there's huge range of material that you might be interested in that you might stumble across.
Great. Well, if there are no questions, that's okay. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take this recording, I'll host it online, send everyone the link like I mentioned earlier. As far as the login process that Drew took us through, the Help Center information, the links, I'll be sure to include that in the email as well, so that you guys can take a look later. And Drew will be copied on that email. So if you do have questions after this session, feel free to either use the link on the library's homepage, or you can just email us back, and we'll help you as best we can.
Awesome. Thanks, Vanessa.
Awesome. No, thank you, Drew. And I guess if there are no more questions, we did get a thank you very much for your presentation. A few thank yous in the chat. So thank you guys for joining us and taking the time to learn a bit about PitchBook today. And have a great rest of your day. Keep an eye out for that email, guys.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.